Marcus Chen wiped the sweat from his forehead as he stared at the massive alien wreckage that had crashed into the asteroid mining station 3 days ago. The twisted metal gleamed under the harsh lights of the maintenance bay, its surface covered in symbols that seemed to shift when he wasn't looking directly at them. The other miners gave the thing a wide berth. Hell, even the station's chief engineer refused to go near it after the initial scan showed energy readings that made no sense. But Marcus had always been different. While other humans feared the unknown, he felt drawn to it like a moth to flame. The ship was roughly the size of a small Earth destroyer, but its design was unlike anything in the galactic databases. Smooth curves flowed into sharp angles, and the hull seemed to be made from a single piece of some unknown alloy. What really caught his attention were the scorch marks and impact craters covering its surface. This thing had been through hell and back. Station Commander Rodriguez had been clear about the orders from Earth Command. "Don't touch it, Chen. We're waiting for the xenotech specialists to arrive next month. This is way above our pay grade." But Marcus couldn't help himself. During his off shift, he found himself back in the maintenance bay, running his hands along the alien hull. The metal was warm to the touch, almost alive. His engineering background told him this was impossible, but his instincts said otherwise. On the second night, he discovered something that changed everything. Hidden beneath layers of battle damage was what looked like an access panel. The symbols around it pulsed with a faint blue light when he approached. Without thinking, he pressed his palm against it. The response was immediate. The panel dissolved like liquid, revealing a dark opening just large enough for a human to crawl through. Marcus grabbed a portable light and squeezed inside, his heart pounding with excitement and terror. The interior was a maze of corridors that defied logic. Passages seemed to bend in directions that shouldn't exist, and the walls were covered in more of those shifting symbols. But what struck him most was the silence. Not the dead silence of a broken ship, but the waiting silence of something that was merely sleeping. As he explored deeper, Marcus began to understand the layout. This wasn't just a warship, it was a living weapons platform. Every surface, every curve, every angle was designed for maximum efficiency in combat. The technology was so advanced that it made human starships look like paper airplanes. In what he assumed was the engine room, Marcus found the source of the ship's problems. A massive crystal formation at the center of the chamber was cracked and dark. Smaller crystals throughout the room flickered weakly like dying stars. This had to be the power core, and it was barely functioning. Marcus had spent 15 years working on fusion reactors and antimatter engines, but this was something entirely different. The crystal seemed to pulse with its own rhythm, almost like a heartbeat. As he examined it closer, he noticed that the cracks followed specific patterns. This wasn't random damage from battle. Someone or something had deliberately sabotaged this ship. The next few hours blurred together as Marcus worked to understand the alien technology. The symbols on the walls seemed to respond to his presence, becoming clearer and more defined. Slowly, impossibly, they began to make sense. Not through any logical translation, but through pure intuition. The ship was teaching him. He learned that the vessel was called the Shadowheart, and it belonged to a species known as the Vorthak. They were an ancient race of warriors who had fought against something called the Void Swarm for millennia. The ship's crew had died fighting a desperate rearguard action, but not before they had damaged their own power core to prevent the ship from falling into enemy hands. As dawn approached on the station, Marcus made a decision that would change the course of human history. He was going to repair the Shadowheart. The work was unlike anything he had ever attempted. Human tools were useless against the alien materials, so he had to learn to work with the ship's own repair systems. The vessel seemed to guide his hands, showing him which crystals to replace and which circuits to reroute. It was like performing surgery on a sleeping giant. Other miners began to notice his extended absences, but Marcus covered his tracks carefully. He told them he was working on maintenance projects for the commander, and since no one wanted to do extra work, they didn't ask questions. By the end of the week, Marcus had managed to partially restore the power core. The main crystal still had cracks, but enough energy was flowing to activate the ship's basic systems. Lights flickered to life throughout the corridors, and the symbols on the walls glowed with warm amber light. That's when he heard it, a voice speaking directly into his mind. "Human," the voice said, ancient and tired but somehow grateful. "You have awakened me from death's embrace. I am Korath, last of the Shadowheart's crew, bound to this vessel until my duty is complete." Marcus nearly fell over in shock. "You're alive? How is that possible?" "My physical form perished long ago," Korath explained. "But my consciousness was merged with the ship's core systems before death claimed me. I have waited in darkness for someone worthy to restore what was broken." The alien's presence in his mind felt strange but not threatening. There was an overwhelming sense of honor and purpose that Marcus found himself respecting. "What happened to your ship? Who did this to you?" Images flashed through Marcus's consciousness, memories of a final desperate battle. Massive insectoid creatures swarming through space, consuming entire star systems. The Vorthak fleet making their last stand to buy time for evacuations. Ships dying one by one as they held the line against impossible odds. "The Void Swarm comes," Korath said simply. "They devour all life, all matter, all hope. My people held them back for 10,000 years, but we are gone now. The warning must be given to those who remain." Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. "Are you saying these things are still out there? Still coming?" "They sleep between feedings. But yes, they will wake again when the stars align correctly. Your species must be prepared, human. The Shadowheart was damaged, but it can still fight. It can still teach. Will you help me complete my final mission?" Looking around at the restored corridors, feeling the ship's power humming through the deck plates beneath his feet, Marcus knew there was only one answer he could give. "Tell me what you need." The next phase of his secret work began immediately. Under Korath's guidance, Marcus learned to interface directly with the ship's systems. The Vorthak had used a combination of biotechnology and quantum mechanics that was centuries ahead of human science. But somehow, with the aliens' help, Marcus found himself understanding concepts that should have been impossible. The ship's weapons systems were particularly impressive. Instead of crude projectiles or energy beams, the Shadowheart used something called phase displacement cannons. They could shift matter slightly out of phase with reality, allowing shots to pass through shields and armor as if they weren't there. The defensive systems were equally advanced, creating localized gravity wells that could deflect incoming fire or crush attacking ships. But the most remarkable discovery was the ship's learning protocols. The Shadowheart didn't just follow programmed responses, it adapted and evolved based on combat experience. Every battle made it smarter, faster, more efficient. It was less of a machine and more of a metallic organism that fed on conflict. "Your species shows promise," Korath told him during one of their mental conversations. "Humans are resourceful, determined, creative in ways my people never were. But you lack discipline. You fight among yourselves when you should be preparing for the real enemy." Marcus had to agree. Even now, human colonies were squabbling over trade routes and territory, while something far worse was sleeping in the void between galaxies. "Can you teach us? Can the ship train human crews?" "Perhaps. But first, we must complete the restoration. The Shadowheart must be whole again if it is to serve as humanity's teacher." The work continued in secret for another 2 weeks. Marcus pushed himself to exhaustion every night, learning alien engineering techniques and slowly bringing the great ship back to life. The other miners began joking that he looked like a ghost, pale and hollow-eyed from lack of sleep, but he pressed on. Finally, on a Tuesday that started like any other, Marcus made the final connection in the power core. The cracked crystal blazed to life with brilliant white light, and the Shadowheart's engines came online with a deep, thrumming roar that shook the entire mining station. Alarms started blaring immediately. Emergency lights flashed red as the station's automated systems detected the massive energy spike. Marcus could hear running footsteps and shouting voices echoing through the corridors as the crew scrambled to respond to what they thought was a catastrophic reactor failure. But inside the alien ship, Marcus felt only peace. The Shadowheart was alive again, fully alive, for the first time in centuries. Every system hummed with perfect efficiency. Every circuit sang with restored power. The ship's consciousness expanded beyond the core, flowing through neural networks that spanned the entire vessel. "It is done," Korath said, and Marcus could hear the satisfaction in the ancient warrior's mental voice. "The Shadowheart lives again. Now comes the true test. Are you ready to face what your commanders will say when they discover what you have accomplished?" Marcus took a deep breath, feeling the weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders. He had just restored an alien warship that could probably destroy every human vessel in the sector without breaking a sweat. The implications were staggering, and he knew that his life would never be the same again. Through the ship's hull, he could hear Commander Rodriguez shouting orders over the intercom, calling for evacuation procedures and emergency response teams. In a few minutes, they would trace the energy source to this bay and find him standing inside an active alien vessel. "I'm ready," Marcus said, and meant it. Whatever came next, humanity would face it with the Shadowheart at their side. The doors to the maintenance bay exploded inward as Commander Rodriguez led a full security team into what they expected to be a disaster zone. Instead, they found Marcus Chen standing calmly beside the now active alien vessel, its hull glowing with soft blue light and its engines humming with barely contained power. "Chen, get away from that thing before it kills you!" Rodriguez shouted, raising his plasma rifle. The other security officers spread out, their weapons trained on both Marcus and the ship. Marcus held up his hands peacefully. "Commander, I need you to listen to me. This ship isn't a threat. It's here to help us." "Help us?" Rodriguez's voice cracked with disbelief. "That's an alien weapons platform that just came online without authorization. For all we know, it's calling in the rest of its fleet to wipe us out." Before Marcus could respond, the Shadowheart's external speakers crackled to life. Korath's voice emerged, speaking in accented but clear human English. "Commander Rodriguez, I understand your fear, but I assure you that we mean no harm to humanity. I am Korath, last guardian of the vessel you call an alien craft. Your subordinate has performed a great service, not just for his own species, but for all life in this galaxy." The security team exchanged nervous glances. First contact protocol had always been theoretical until now. None of them had expected it to happen on a remote mining station in the middle of nowhere. Rodriguez kept his weapon steady. "Prove it. If you're here to help, why didn't you announce yourselves when you arrived? Why the deception?" "Because we were dying," Korath replied simply. "Our ship was crippled in our final battle against an enemy that threatens all sentient life. We crashed here not by choice, but because our systems failed. Marcus Chen restored us when your specialists would have spent months simply trying to understand our technology." Marcus stepped forward, ignoring the weapons pointed at him. "Commander, I've been inside the ship for weeks. I've learned about their history, their technology, and most importantly, about the threat they were fighting. We need to contact Earth Command immediately." "Stand down!" Rodriguez barked when several officers shifted their aim. "Chen, you violated about 12 different regulations, and that's assuming this alien isn't controlling your mind. How do I know you're still you?" It was a fair question. Marcus had wondered the same thing during his time with Korath. but the alien had never tried to control him, only guide and teach. "Ask me something only I would know," Marcus said. Rodriguez thought for a moment. "What did you tell me after your first week on the station? About why you took this assignment?" Marcus smiled slightly. "I said I took the job because I wanted to get as far away from my ex-wife as possible without actually leaving human space. And you told me that if I worked hard, you'd recommend me for the engineering rotation on the new Europa colony ships." The commander lowered his weapon slightly. The details were too specific and personal to be fabricated by an alien intelligence. "All right, Bao, but that doesn't change the fact that you've activated a potentially hostile vessel without authorization." "Then allow me to demonstrate our peaceful intentions," Korath interrupted. Through the ship's speakers came the sound of systems powering down. The blue glow faded from the hull, and the engine noise dropped to barely audible levels. "I have placed the Shadowheart in standby mode. Your weapons, while primitive, could damage us in this state. Would a hostile force make itself vulnerable to prove a point?" Rodriguez hesitated, then made a decision that would echo through history. He lowered his weapon and activated his communicator. "All stations, this is the commander. Stand down to yellow alert. Secure the maintenance bay and establish a perimeter. But do not fire unless directly threatened." He looked at Marcus with a mixture of anger and curiosity. "You have 1 hour to explain everything before I call in the specialists. And Chen? This better be the most important conversation in human history." What followed was indeed historic. As Marcus and Korath explained the situation, more station personnel gathered to listen. The story of the Vorthak, the Void Swarm, and the 10,000-year war captivated everyone present. But it was when Korath shared his memories of the final battle that the mood shifted from curiosity to cold fear. The holographic display that materialized above the Shadowheart showed images of space itself being consumed by writhing masses of dark matter, planets stripped bare in hours. Entire star systems going dark as something vast and hungry devoured every atom of matter they contained. "The swarm follows a pattern," Korath explained as the images shifted to show galactic charts. "They feed in cycles, consuming all life in a region before returning to the void between galaxies to digest and multiply. My people calculated that their next feeding cycle will begin within 50 of your years." Dr. Sarah Kim, the station's chief scientist, spoke up from the crowd that had gathered. 50 years? That's not enough time. Even if we started mobilizing every human world tomorrow, we couldn't build a fleet capable of fighting something like that." "Which is why the Shadowheart must serve as your teacher," Korath replied. "Our weapons and defensive technologies are specifically designed to combat swarm entities. One properly equipped vessel can destroy swarm formations that would require hundreds of your current ships to engage." Commander Rodriguez rubbed his temples, feeling the weight of responsibility crushing down on him. "Assuming we believe all this, and assuming Earth Command doesn't have us all arrested for contact violations, what exactly are you proposing?" Marcus had been thinking about this moment for days. "We need to form a joint task force. Human crews trained on Vorthak technology, with the Shadowheart as our prototype and training vessel. If we can prove the technology works, Earth Command will have to listen." "And if we can't?" Rodriguez asked. Korath's response was grim. "Then, in 50 years, humanity will join the Vorthak as nothing more than a memory preserved in the ship's databanks." The debate that followed lasted hours. Some wanted to immediately contact Earth Command and turn everything over to the authorities. Others argued for secrecy, fearing that bureaucrats would bury the project in red tape. But eventually, a consensus emerged around Marcus's proposal. They would spend 1 month conducting tests and demonstrations. If the alien technology proved as effective as Korath claimed, they would present their findings to Earth Command with irrefutable proof. If not, they would hand everything over and accept whatever consequences came. The testing began immediately. Using the station's automated defense drones as targets, Korath demonstrated the Shadowheart's capabilities in controlled scenarios. The results were beyond anything the humans had imagined possible. The phase displacement cannons could strike targets through solid asteroid barriers as if the rock wasn't there. The gravity manipulation systems could crush attack drones into marble-sized spheres or fling them into deep space with pinpoint accuracy. Most impressive were the adaptive shields that learned from each attack, becoming more effective with every strike they absorbed. But the real breakthrough came when Marcus volunteered to undergo the neural interface procedure that would allow him to pilot the ship directly. The process was risky, requiring surgical implantation of Vorthak biocircuits that would integrate with his nervous system. Dr. Kim protested that they didn't understand the long-term effects, but Marcus was determined. "Someone has to be first," he said, as they prepared for the procedure. "If this technology is going to save humanity, we need humans who can use it." The surgery took 12 hours. Korath guided Dr. Kim through techniques that were part medicine, part engineering, and part something that could only be called art. The biocircuits had to be grown rather than implanted, cultivated from samples of Marcus's own neural tissue, and then enhanced with Vorthak biotechnology. When Marcus finally awakened, he felt fundamentally changed. The ship's consciousness was now a constant presence in his mind, not intrusive, but available. He could sense every system, every circuit, every weapon, as if they were extensions of his own body. The first test flight was scheduled for the following day. The asteroid field around the mining station provided a perfect testing ground, far from any inhabited systems, but full of obstacles that could simulate combat conditions. As Marcus settled into the command chair that had been modified for human physiology, he felt the Shadowheart's systems coming online around him. The interface was intuitive in a way that human technology had never been. Instead of reading displays and pressing buttons, he simply thought about where he wanted to go and what he wanted to do. The ship responded like a living thing. When Marcus thought about evasive maneuvers, the Shadowheart flowed through space like liquid metal, dodging between asteroids that would have destroyed any human vessel. When he focused on target acquisition, the weapons systems painted every potential threat in his mind with crystal clarity. But it was when they encountered the unexpected visitor that the true test began. The alien vessel that emerged from hyperspace near the asteroid field was unlike anything in the galactic databases. Roughly cylindrical with organic-looking protrusions, it moved with the fluid grace of a predator. It was also broadcasting identification codes that made Korath's consciousness recoil in horror. "Swarm Scout," the alien whispered in Marcus's mind. "Impossible! The cycle isn't due to begin for decades." The scout ship's sensors locked onto the Shadowheart immediately. Marcus felt its alien intelligence probing at the ship's defenses, analyzing their capabilities with cold, mechanical precision. There would be no negotiation, no attempt at communication. The swarm existed only to consume. Marcus acted on pure instinct. The phase displacement cannons swiveled toward the scout ship and fired in perfect synchronization. The quantum-charged projectiles passed through the enemy's shields as if they weren't there and struck the hull with devastating effect. But the scout ship didn't die easily. Its organic hull began to regenerate almost immediately, and it returned fire with weapons that seemed to bend space itself. Reality twisted around the Shadowheart as gravity waves tried to crush the ship into scrap metal. This was where the Shadowheart's adaptive systems proved their worth. The shields analyzed the incoming attacks and began generating counter-harmonics that neutralized the space-warping effects. Meanwhile, Marcus found himself anticipating the enemy's movements with supernatural accuracy, as if he could read its intentions directly from its neural patterns. The battle lasted only minutes, but it felt like hours. Marcus pushed the ship through maneuvers that would have liquefied a normal human pilot, using the inertial dampeners and gravity manipulation to pull acceleration forces that exceeded 15 Gs. The Shadowheart responded to his commands with eager precision, its weapon systems firing in patterns too complex for conscious thought. When the scout ship finally exploded in a brilliant flash of released energy, Marcus felt both triumph and terror. They had won, but the implications were staggering. "The advanced scouts are already here," Korath said as they began the flight back to the station. "The main swarm cannot be far behind. 50 years has become perhaps 5. Humanity's time to prepare has almost run out." As they docked with the mining station, Marcus knew that everything had changed. They were no longer dealing with a theoretical future threat, but with an immediate and present danger. The Shadowheart had proven itself in combat, but one ship would never be enough to stop what was coming. The real work was about to begin. Humanity would need to transform itself from a species that fought over trade routes and colonial boundaries into a unified force capable of defending all life in the galaxy. And they would have to do it faster than anyone thought possible. Commander Rodriguez was waiting for them in the docking bay, his face pale with the knowledge of what they had witnessed on the ship's external cameras. "How many more of those things are out there?" he asked. Marcus climbed out of the command chair, feeling the weight of the neural interface like a constant headache. But beneath the pain was something else, a sense of purpose that burned brighter than anything he had ever felt before. "Enough to end everything we've ever known," he said quietly. "Unless we stop them first." 6 months had passed since the encounter with the Swarm Scout, and the remote mining station had been transformed into humanity's most classified military installation. The bureaucratic nightmare of convincing Earth Command had taken weeks, but the recorded battle footage from the Shadowheart had made denial impossible. Admiral Sarah Chen, Marcus's younger sister and one of Earth's most decorated naval officers, now commanded what had officially been designated as Project Prometheus. Her arrival 3 months ago had brought military discipline to what had been a chaotic mix of scientists, engineers, and confused politicians. The station's expansion was staggering. Construction ships arrived weekly, building additional research bays, living quarters, and most importantly, manufacturing facilities designed to produce human vessels incorporating Vorthak technology. The original mining operation had been completely absorbed into the military complex. Marcus stood in the primary construction bay, watching teams of human and alien-designed robots work together to complete humanity's first hybrid warship. The UES Defiance was twice the size of the Shadowheart, but built using human manufacturing techniques enhanced by Vorthak biotechnology. It represented everything they had learned in the past months of intensive research and development. The neural interface compatibility tests are showing 97% success rates now, Dr. Kim reported as she approached with her latest findings. "We've managed to modify the biocircuits to work with human neurophysiology without the rejection issues we were seeing in the early trials." Marcus nodded, though part of his attention remained connected to the Shadowheart through his own interface. The ship was currently in orbit above the station, its sensors sweeping space for any signs of additional swarm activity. So far, the scout ship had been alone, but Korath's calculations suggested that was about to change. "How many pilots do we have ready for deployment?" Marcus asked. 47 with full neural integration. Another 130 in various stages of training, Dr. Kim replied. "But Marcus, I have to tell you, the psychological profiles are concerning. The interface changes people, not in bad ways necessarily, but in permanent ways. The pilots are developing enhanced spatial awareness, improved reaction times, even what seems to be limited precognitive abilities during combat simulations." Marcus understood the concern. He himself had changed dramatically since his first neural integration. His perception of space and time had shifted in ways that were difficult to explain to those who hadn't experienced it. Sometimes he found himself thinking in mathematical concepts that hadn't existed in human science 6 months ago. "The enemy we're fighting isn't human," he said quietly. "Maybe we need to become something more than human to defeat them." Admiral Chen's voice echoed through the bay's communication system. "All senior staff report to the command center immediately. We have incoming priority communication from Earth Command." The command center had been built around the Shadowheart's communication array, allowing instant contact with Earth despite the vast distance. When the senior staff assembled, the holographic display showed Fleet Admiral Harrison, the highest-ranking officer in human space. "Project Prometheus," Admiral Harrison began without preamble. "I have good news and catastrophic news. The good news is that the Colonial Assembly has approved unlimited funding for your research. Every available resource is being directed toward ship construction and pilot training." Marcus felt his heart sink. Good news first meant the catastrophic news was truly terrible. Admiral Harrison continued. "The catastrophic news is that our deep space monitoring stations have detected massive gravitational anomalies at the edge of the galaxy. Our best scientists believe these are the advanced formations of your void swarm. They'll be in the outer colonies within 18 months. The command center fell silent. 18 months to prepare for a war against an enemy that had destroyed civilizations far more advanced than humanity. It seemed impossible. "How many ships will we have ready?" Admiral Chen asked, her voice carefully controlled. "If we push production beyond all safety margins and conscript every qualified pilot in human space, maybe 300 hybrid vessels, plus whatever conventional fleet units we can retrofit with your new technologies." Korath's voice joined the conversation through the Shadowheart speakers. "Admiral Harrison, with respect to your forces, 300 ships will not be sufficient. The formation approaching your galaxy contains approximately 50,000 entities, ranging from scouts to planet killers the size of your largest asteroids." The silence that followed was deafening. The mathematics were simple and terrifying. Even if every human ship destroyed dozens of swarm entities before being destroyed itself, they would be overwhelmed. But Marcus had been thinking about this problem for months, and he had an idea that even Korath considered impossible. "What if we don't fight them ship to ship?" Marcus said suddenly. "What if we use their own nature against them?" All eyes turned to him. Through his neural link, he could feel Korath's intense curiosity. "The swarm consumes matter and energy to grow and reproduce," Marcus continued. "But what if we gave them something they couldn't digest, something that would poison them from within?" Dr. Kim caught on first. "You're talking about quantum viruses, hostile information patterns embedded in matter that looks digestible but actually corrupts their systems." "Exactly. We've learned that swarm entities share a collective consciousness through quantum entanglement. If we can introduce the right kind of disruptive pattern into that network, we might be able to cause cascading failures throughout their entire formation." Admiral Chen leaned forward intently. "How would we deliver such a weapon?" Marcus gestured toward the construction bay where the Defiance neared completion. "We build ships designed not to fight but to be consumed. Vessels that look damaged and helpless, carrying crews of volunteers willing to sacrifice themselves to save humanity." The concept was horrifying in its implications, but brilliant in its simplicity. Instead of trying to outgun an enemy with overwhelming numbers, they would use humanity's greatest strength, their willingness to sacrifice for others. Korath's mental voice carried a note of profound respect. "Your species continues to surprise me, Marcus Chen. This strategy has possibilities, but the quantum virus would need to be extremely sophisticated. We would need to understand swarm consciousness patterns far better than we currently do. Then we get a live specimen to study," Marcus said grimly. The Shadowheart sensors detected debris from the scout ship that contained intact neural tissue. If we can capture and study a swarm entity, we might be able to reverse engineer their consciousness patterns. What followed were the most intensive 18 months in human history. Every available scientist, engineer, and military expert was thrown into Project Prometheus. Entire worlds were converted into shipyards and training facilities. The human population was mobilized on a scale not seen since the ancient world wars. The research into swarm consciousness proved both fascinating and terrifying. The entities weren't truly alive in any sense humans could understand. They were more like self-replicating weapons, created by some ancient civilization and then abandoned to consume the galaxy. Their consciousness was collective but hierarchical, with larger entities controlling smaller ones in a network of quantum-entangled command structures. The quantum virus that Dr. Kim's team developed was elegant in its deadliness. It appeared to be normal matter at first contact, but once absorbed into the swarm network, it began rewriting the quantum signatures that held their consciousness together. The effect would cascade through the collective, causing confusion, system failures, and eventually complete breakdown of their coordination. But the delivery system required human crews to pilot ships directly into the swarm formations, knowing they would be consumed in the process. The volunteers came forward anyway, thousands of them. Pilots, engineers, scientists, and soldiers who understood that their sacrifice might be the only thing standing between the swarm and the extinction of all life in the galaxy. Marcus found himself selected to lead the first delivery mission. The irony wasn't lost on him that the man who had restored an alien warship would now use human courage to destroy an alien threat. The Shadowheart had been modified for the mission. Its hull now carried concealed quantum virus packages designed to look like standard ship components. Marcus's neural interface had been upgraded to allow him to control the virus release sequence even while the ship was being consumed. The day of the mission dawned clear and cold on the station. 150 ships prepared to launch, each carrying a crew of volunteers and enough quantum virus to contaminate millions of swarm entities. The conventional fleet stood ready to support them, but everyone knew this battle would be won or lost by the sacrifice ships. As Marcus settled into the Shadowheart's command chair for what might be the last time, Korath's presence filled his mind with something he had never felt from the ancient warrior before: hope. "Marcus Chen," Korath said formally, "it has been my honor to serve alongside your species. If we succeed today, the galaxy will remember that when the darkness came, humanity chose to stand and fight rather than flee or surrender." The launch was silent and graceful. 150 ships rose from the station and its supporting facilities, accelerating toward a rendezvous with destiny. Behind them, the conventional fleet followed at maximum safe distance, ready to exploit whatever chaos the sacrifice ships might create. The swarm formation was visible long before they reached weapons range. It stretched across space like a living cancer, consuming the matter from 3 entire star systems as it grew and prepared for the final assault on human space. Individual entities ranged from ship-sized scouts to massive planet killers that dwarfed anything in human experience. As they approached, Marcus could feel the swarm's attention turning toward them. The collective consciousness examined the approaching ships with predatory interest, cataloging their energy signatures and calculating their nutritional value. "All ships, this is Prometheus Actual," Marcus broadcast on an encrypted channel. "Execute delivery protocol in 30 seconds. It's been an honor serving with you all." The sacrifice ships scattered, each targeting different sections of the massive swarm formation. The entities moved to intercept them, opening massive feeding orifices that could swallow entire vessels whole. Marcus aimed the Shadowheart at one of the larger entities, a creature the size of a small moon that seemed to be coordinating the actions of thousands of smaller swarm units. As they approached its feeding apparatus, he could feel Korath's consciousness merging more completely with his own. Together, the ancient warrior whispered, as it should be. The moment of consumption was unlike anything Marcus had imagined. The shadow heart disappeared into an organic cavity filled with digestive acids and processing mechanisms designed to break down matter at the atomic level. But as the ship's hull began to dissolve, Marcus activated the quantum virus packages. The effect was immediate and devastating. The virus spread through the entity's consciousness like wildfire, corrupting the quantum signatures that held its awareness together. Through his neural link, Marcus felt the creature's confusion and pain as its identity began to fragment. But more importantly, he felt the virus spreading through the quantum entanglement network that connected all swarm entities. Like a computer virus jumping from system to system, the quantum corruption raced through the collective consciousness at faster-than-light speeds. The result was chaos beyond imagination. Across the entire swarm formation, entities began turning on each other as their coordination broke down. Command hierarchies collapsed. Navigation systems failed. The precise choreography of the collective became a thrashing mass of confused and hostile organisms. From his dying ship, Marcus watched the conventional fleet move in to exploit the chaos. Human and hybrid vessels tore into the disorganized swarm formation with devastating effect. Weapons that had been useless against coordinated entities now found easy targets among the confused and fighting creatures. The battle lasted for hours, but the outcome was never in doubt once the quantum virus took hold. One by one, the swarm entities were destroyed or driven into retreat. The massive formation that had threatened all life in the galaxy was reduced to scattered remnants fleeing into dark space. As the Shadowheart systems finally failed completely, Marcus felt Korath's consciousness fading alongside his own. But there was satisfaction in the ancient warrior's mental voice. "The darkness is defeated," Korath whispered. "My people's sacrifice is finally vindicated, and your species has proven worthy of the stars." The rescue ship found Marcus 3 hours later, barely alive in an escape pod that the Shadowheart had ejected at the last moment. The neural interface had been destroyed in the ship's death, severing his connection to the vessel that had taught humanity to reach beyond their limitations. But the lesson remained. In the years that followed, as humanity expanded into a galaxy freed from the swarm's threat, they carried with them the knowledge that courage and sacrifice could overcome even impossible odds. The restored alien warship had taught them more than technology. It had taught them who they could become when faced with extinction. Marcus Chen returned to Earth as a hero, but he never stopped looking up at the stars, remembering the voice of an ancient warrior who had waited centuries to complete his final mission. Somewhere in the quantum foam that underlies all reality, Korath's consciousness lived on in the ships and technologies he had helped create, and humanity, the species that had restored a dying warship and used it to save the galaxy, continued to reach for the impossible.